This is an interview that I did back in 2015 with John Knowles. I asked him if he'd be nice enough to share some stories about his old buddy Jerry Reed, and he was more than happy to do it. We recorded this in his home in Nashville, Tennessee. John's a great guitar player in his own right. He's a really smart guy, and he's just a lot of fun to be around. So sit back and enjoy John Knowles sharing some stories about his old buddy Jerry Reed.
He didn't show me a lot. He would make me figure out stuff and make me play stuff for him, and then he would tell me if I was right or not. No, not like that. Here, hand me that thing. One time he said, if it was that hard, I wouldn't have done it. I'd figured out some inside-out way to do what he was doing. A lot of what he did was so innovative on the fingerboard. It was all very calculated, very laid out, and it sounded so complicated, and you just couldn't imagine. And he said one time that when he first started teaching Chet some of those instrumentals, he said it was hard because he said, I wasn't thinking chords, I was thinking lines. So he was thinking moving parts, and Chet was thinking chord shapes, and he said, I had to get him off of those chord shapes and listen to the bass line moving and all those moving parts. And that's why I couldn't figure out what he was doing either. I never heard the chords. And of course, when you see his hand in motion, anybody today can go to YouTube and see him do it. You realize he's spidering all over. He's not grabbing, He'd kind of gotten away from sessions. He was just, I think when I got to town, he had just done that first movie, the W.W. and the Dixie Dance King. And then right after that, he was out a lot. So he actually let his band go when he was doing the Smoking the Bandit stuff. And then after that kind of settled down, and he reformed the band. So the band that he kind of worked with, for the rest of his professional life, had not a giant amount of turnover. But that's the band that had, I think, Buddy Green was in a harmonica and some of those guys. And they worked with him a lot over. So if you see things on YouTube that's later Jerry Reed, it's that band. And a lot of times he would teach them to play his instrumentals because he didn't want to risk them on stage. He wanted to, be the guy who was kind of the entertainer guy, So like Mark Thornton, player here in town, knows all the instrumentals because he would learn them so that he could play. And when Jerry would play them, Mark would learn one of Chet's parts when they would play the Chet and Jerry duets.
Are there popular songs that Jerry Reed was the guitar player on in the studio that we might not realize is him?
I'd say a lot of the Bobby Bear stuff, 2 or 3 of the early Elvis. They tried to do them listening to Jerry's demo, and nobody could do what Jerry was doing. So they got Jerry in the studio.
He played on Guitar Man?
Yeah,
Elvis's
Guitar
version?
Man and Tupelo, Mississippi Flash. And I don't know if he played on a thing called, he wrote a thing called Love. And I think he wrote 5 of Elvis's big hits. He wrote U.S. Mail and Guitar Man and Tupelo, Mississippi Flash. I forget all of them, but he played on some of those, yeah. An audio out there that I've heard that I think it's been on YouTube. It's a picture of Jerry and Elvis where they're in the studio recording Guitar Man and laughing and cutting up. So I think, and by that time, as a studio player, Jerry is like really good. He's not just original, he's good. So if he sits down to do that, they get it. It doesn't take 35 takes. And but nobody could do what he was doing. I remember him saying one time that he was at his cockiest when he was that good in the studio. He said I knew they couldn't tell what I was doing. He said, so I just turned around and faced the window so they could see what I was doing. I knew they still didn't know. And it's true,
A lot of that stuff sounded like he was playing an electric guitar straight into the board when they recorded.
It does sound that way, doesn't it? I don't know. Chip Young, I think, recorded him a lot later on on his tracks, and then Chet recorded him a lot too. I don't know, but you're right. The like a Telecaster stuff does sound pretty in your face.
Was he particular about his amps, or?
Yeah, when he would travel, I mean, he a lot of what he used was through a Music Man that everybody seemed to love about around that time. Chet was playing one too. He was particular about guitars, but he was more particular about the setup than anything, to where it was easy to play. He played a nylon string, and I handed him mine one time, and he just thought it was way too hard to play. And I picked up his, and it felt like the strings had been painted on the fingerboard. It was just, I could get nothing but snap, rattle, and buzz out of it. And he could get a note out of it, but he could make it snap if he wanted to. So he could kind of dial in with his touch what that sound would be.
Did he do his own setups?
I bet he did. Yeah. Oh, he had that one guitar that looks like the cutaway is just sawed off. I think he sawed it off.
I actually went to Jerry Reed's grave about 10 years ago, and I met a guy while I was there that claimed to be his pastor. And he told some stories about Jerry telling a lot of jokes during church and cutting up and being a distraction that everyone enjoyed.
Yes.
Was that very much like what he actually was like?
Yeah, he was kind of that character most of the time. And then every now and then, and Dick Feller and I, who wrote a lot of the songs with Jerry, were saying that there was another Jerry, which was very calm and very deep and very sensitive. And those songs like Today Is Mine, A Thing Called Love, those are coming from another place. And I think he would get that way. I bet you Bobby Bear saw that side of him a lot. Out fishing, because that Today Is Mine is got when the sun came this morning, I took the time to watch it rise. And that guy.
The darkness from the side.
Yes.
Felt how small and unimportant all my troubles seemed to be, and how lucky another day belonged to me.
Yeah. It doesn't sound like the Smokey and the Bandit guy, does it?
That was the theme to the Bill Dance fishing show.
That's right. It was a fishing, yeah.
Was he buddies with Bill Dance?
Yeah, yeah.
I remember him being on the show, on Bill Dance show, and I seem to remember him calling Bill Dance Willie Two-Step.
He had nicknames for everybody, He had, I have a feeling like half the things we say that are expressions now, Jerry probably thought of them. He was just kind of constantly, making up stuff. And one of the times I remember I went by there and I was talking to somebody, and Jerry walks in the back door, and all of a sudden he's got me in a headlock, and he's doing that thing, where you with your knuckles on your head, like junior high, He says, come on, we're going to lunch and you're buying. And he dragged me out the door, and then we get there, of course, and he buys because, I remember that day we talked about the first time we heard Chet play, and he talked about that, being a kid, listening to the radio and hearing that and not knowing how it was done, but knowing that was it, That's the other thing about Jerry. He could sound just like Chet, He just didn't because he knew that spot was taken. Well, I'll tell you the other thing is everywhere he went, Jerry was in the room and with the people, and, so I remember one time there was a guy fixing the roof at his place, and Jerry drives up, sees the guy with the ladder, climbs the ladder to go talk to the roofer, and how many people who are stars and have been in movies and everything would want to talk to the roofer, he was like a regular guy in like that in a lot of ways, It seemed to me like the times I ever went out with him, we would go out for a hamburger or something, and I don't remember anybody ever say anything to us except people in the restaurant who knew him because he came a lot. So I guess, I've heard people in the band say that if you'd go somewhere with Jerry and he'd pull over to get a sandwich or something, that by then people knew who he was, They'd be driving the bus and whatnot. And he said one time that they were trying to get the bus started. It broke down out in the middle of nowhere. And Jerry said, what's the problem here? And he says, we can't get the, he said, here, give me that CB. And he goes, breaker, 19. It's the Snowman. And a bunch of trucks pulled over and came to their rescue, So he was not above playing that card if he needed to,
Imagine when those truckers got home and tried to tell their wife.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody
come on. Yeah, And they said, one of the guys said, too, it was real late. They were on their way somewhere, and they pulled over after a gig to get breakfast. Not the Cracker Barrel, but someplace like that. It would have been open all night. And Jerry says, nice, I want you to take off all your Smokey and the Bandit gear and no hats, no T-shirts. We're going to go in here. We're going to get some sandwiches. We're going to hit the road. We got to get to the next place, wherever it is. So they go in there, and a waitress comes over to the table, and Jerry says, honey, Give me a couple of those hen-laid eggs, and I'll tell you how I want them. And before long, everybody in the restaurant, he could not resist. I guess the only other thing that I would say that kind of caught me off guard was how much he underestimated himself as a guitar player. Because I think both as a player and as a composer, he stands out there totally on his own. There is no precedent for him. But he was so taken by Chet that he thought, he said, now, remember one time he said, now, Chet, he said, there's a guitar player. And he said, and then he would say, I'm a guitar thinker. He said, I know how to come up with stuff on a guitar. But on the other hand, if you just listen to what he did, and his incredible touch and the groove he established, you know, I would say there's a period of time there when anybody who was in Jerry Reed's band had passed a huge test to even get to the front door to be in his band, you know. I think it was Aaron Till told me one time he auditioned for Jerry's band, and Jerry said, well, you're trainable. that was how I got hired, you know.
Well, how did Chet talk about Jerry?
Oh, he thought Jerry was the greatest. And he talked that way about Jerry, and then he talked that way about Lenny Breau. It was just the two great guitar players in Chet's book. The last time I saw Jerry, Buster B. Jones and I went out to visit him, and he was at his place, and he was pretty sick and had oxygen and was in bed. But he wanted us to come out and visit, you know. And the first thing he said was, if either one of you guys makes me laugh, and of course, then we all laughed, you know, because he was going to be hard to laugh with the oxygen, you know. Either one of you guys tries to make. And then, and he said, get those guitars out, play some tunes for me. So we played some tunes, some of his tunes and some of our own stuff, and just visited. And what I remember him doing was at one point he said, get over here. So I went over, and he took my hand, you know, kind of like that double handshake like the preacher does when he uses two hands to grab yours, you know. And he says, I just want to thank you for writing my music down and getting everybody out there to play it. And I said, well, you know, you and I, my turn. Just cut me off. And then he went on to say, you know, he said, I didn't think anybody was going to learn to play it when you wrote it down. He said, but you wrote it down, and they did. So I want to thank you for putting my music out there. So I think he knew that was his chance to say, thank you. That's the same guy that wrote Today Is Mine talking to me at that moment, you know. And so it was a funny thing, and it was a sad thing, and Buster and I got in the car and drove away and knew that we wouldn't see him again, you know. But boy, we were sure glad we'd been there that day. It was a beautiful, beautiful thing.
You know, my entire life, I've loved that song, Today Is Mine.
Oh, yeah. Isn't that something, though? But did I tell you something? To know that he wrote that song tells you there's something else going on besides Smokey and the Bandit.
That was John Knowles sharing stories about his old buddy, Jerry Reed. If you enjoyed this, tell your friends about it. Click that like button, comment, and tell me what your favorite Jerry Reed song is. And I will talk to you guys soon. Much love to you.